Burkina Faso is gaining a lot of popularity these days. I mean, if you're like me, your entire feed is flooded with all these images about Ibrahim Traoré and whatever is happening with him or his neighboring countries or his allies. But this guy is facing a lot of heat right now, and he's also getting a lot of popularity worldwide. The reason why I find it extra interesting is because I'm from a country called Suriname, which is it isn't small, but it doesn't have a lot of people, like 500,000 people in the Caribbean. Over there, he's a hit. Like, he's a huge hit. You can see videos of him being shared on WhatsApp and Facebook a lot, which I think is interesting, because it is a smaller country, but they do feel a lot of loyalty to this guy, and I think also very protective of this guy. And I can't say I don't share that sentiment. I actually do share this sentiment. I think he's a really cool guy because he's a very proud African person. He's all about Pan-Africanism. And if you don't know what it means that he believes in the union of Africa as a continent. He doesn't believe that the countries need to be on themselves. He believes they should be united. And I think that's amazing. I'm happy for my African brothers and sisters. I think it's the right choice after so many centuries of oppression by outsiders and so many of these incredible African leaders who have been sabotaged. I think it's incredible that they, inshallah, will have an opportunity to unite again. And I think Ibrahim Traoré is the faith that we all needed, that it's going to happen again. Although he isn't the only one who is leading this movement, obviously. And he's also a Muslim man, mashallah. So I'm really proud of him in many different ways. He doesn't feel the need to assimilate to the West, to gain popularity, which I think is also very positive, because I think it's important for African people to stick to their own culture and their own identity, because I think that you don't find any joy when you assimilate to a culture that isn't yours or is being shoved down your throat. I'm also happy that I get to see that he is doing this, because I did check with my followers who knows about him, and I could see that a lot of people from Western countries actually didn't know about him. And I think it has to do with the algorithm. I don't think they get this type of news. I'm just so happy that I live in a country where I do get this type of news. In the Middle East, you get to see all the different countries, and there is a lot of solidarity with Africans, and people are really proud of the African continent, even though it's not portrayed like that in the media. I think a lot of people have these preconceived notions about how people in Muslim Arab countries feel about Africans. A lot of times I hear Arabs hate Black people, Arabs don't like them, Arabs always want to mistreat them, but I don't notice that sentiment myself. I see that there is definitely discrimination against Black people worldwide. I've said this time and time again. Anti-Blackness is global, but at the same time, in the name of Islam, you can also see how many people are rising above that and choosing to live according to the words of our Prophet, peace be upon him, who said that Black people aren't better than white people aren't better than Black people. So mashallah, I love that. I'm going to tell you some of the basics about Burkina Faso, because I think it's good to have this on our radar. So Burkina Faso, the capital is, I feel embarrassed saying it because I feel like I say it weird, but it's Ouagadougou. The name of the people is Burkinabe, the Burkinabe people. That's cool. I didn't know that. I'm happy I know that, because I feel like it's such a European thing not to know. The population is 23 million people. That's a lot. They speak French. It's in West Africa. They have the CFA franc. I have to tell you more about that because that's crazy. It's mostly a Muslim country, but they also have Christians, 23% and 15% indigenous people. The former name was Upper Volta, by the way, which had to do with his river, I think there. The French named that Upper Volta, but it's crazy. That's not even an African word. Now they are called Burkina Faso, which is the land of the upright people. Love that for them. The famous leader is Thomas Sankara. He renamed the country. A lot of people know Ibrahim Traoré, but I think a lot of people also know Thomas Sankara. His last name, by the way, is the same as the very famous Sankara University. So I thought that was also so cool. He was also a super inspiring person, apparently. And I think a lot of people don't know that from this generation. I think the older generation might know it. So Captain Ibrahim Traoré came to power through a coup d'etat. he's been a little bit naughty, but that's okay. I read a book about him. You know, a lot of times when these leaders, they come to power with a coup d'etat, it could definitely be because they feel like the previous leaders were actually mouthpieces for European colonizers. Ibrahim Traoré, who has been very open about how he doesn't believe many African leaders think in the benefit of their people. I think that might have been the case as well. And also, if you see him, you know, walk a completely different path than what has been done before, it becomes a bit more obvious as well. Main industry is agriculture, gold and mining, but it is one of the poorest countries in the world, by the way. It's really sad. The GDP per person is around $800, almost $900. In a country like Kuwait, it is $34,000. There's a lot of poverty. The people are living off of very little money. They're not even making about $60, $70 per month. There have been a lot of security challenges, but when we talk about Ibrahim Traoré, he sees everything in a very different light than before. He doesn't try to look at the country in a post-colonial manner, which is something I really appreciate about him. Then we have the previous leader, which is Thomas Sankara, and I think it's good to know about him because he had been assassinated by a coup, and it was led by another political leader. And he was born in Upper Volta when it was still called Upper Volta, which is Burkina Faso. Obviously, he was called Africa's Che Guevara, which is really cool. And he renamed the country to the Land of the Upright People. And so he had a very modest life, and I love leaders like that. He wanted to make a point that you don't have to have a luxury lifestyle when you become president. And I think that Ibrahim Traoré is following a similar lifestyle. Thomas wasn't Muslim. Ibrahim is, and obviously as a Muslim, you have to follow these guidelines as well because it's in the Quran. There's no lavishness or wastefulness. But this guy, Thomas Sankara, had a similar view, and he drove a normal car. He had a very low salary. I mean, it's been talked about that it was like a $450 per month, which probably in that country you can live from. But it just shows that he wasn't trying to rob the country. And it's funny, I'm going to tell you one thing. If a leader is willing not to rob the country, it also means they're not susceptible to bribery. And that immediately makes them a threat because imperialists, like for example, France, it could be any other country, who would want to bribe such a leader and then make this leader betray their own people, they will not do it because they're already living on $450. Like, they're not looking for more money. They're actually looking to better the lives of their people. And I think something similar is happening with Ibrahim Traoré, who is also trying to be really down to earth and talking about how he wants to help his people alleviate poverty and not crack down on them because they're not terrorists in his eyes. According to him, there are security threats. There are people who have become radicalized, but he looks at it a little bit differently because he's like, why have they become radicalized? And according to him, it's because of poverty. It's because they don't have money to survive. So they're more sensitive to being taken by any group of people who's like, hey, let me give you 100 euros extra per month since you're already not making a lot, and then do our dirty work. That's what's happening a lot. And so that's what I really appreciate about Ibrahim Traoré. He's like, I'm not going to treat them like they are bad people by nature. They're not bad people by nature, but they are in a position where they hardly have any choices but to take the money from external forces and to do what they're told. So I love that. But unfortunately, this guy, Thomas Sankara, had been killed. And it was by his former ally, Blaise Compaoré. I don't know how to say it, but I feel like he doesn't even deserve for me to say his name right. No, he doesn't deserve it. That's the story of Thomas Sankara. I think we should know his name. I think we should know his story. He's a very impressive person. And I think we need to learn the lesson from this. Good leaders do get taken out. Why? Because they are not open to scamming their people, to betraying their people, or to taking bribes. MashaAllah, good. Then we get to Ibrahim Traoré. And so who is Ibrahim Traoré? So he committed a coup d'etat. I already said that. He's been a little bit naughty. I'm not going to lie. But he also became the youngest head of state at the time because he was only 34 years old. He's also this type of guy who grew up people would say he would be considered poor. I don't like to use that term, but he didn't have a lot of resources. Let's just say it like that. But he was very disciplined. He was very serious. He was very intelligent. He excelled in mathematics, mashallah, and he became the president in 2022. He used to be a military guy, so he could also see all the problems in the country, and he thought that was very painful. He could see how people lived and all of the challenges they faced, and I think that's also why he said that the people aren't terrorists, but they're just poor, and if we help them get out of poverty, we will also make sure the country will be safe again. And I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think that's also probably why people love him so much. He doesn't want the country to rely on aid or military assistance, which makes sense because he doesn't believe that military assistance is needed if people aren't poor. This really resonates with me because when I did my master's in political science, I actually did research on whether donors like bilateral or multilateral like UN or, for example, bilateral like countries, whether they give aid to a country to help them or whether they do it to just serve their own interest. And I found that most countries and most multilateral donors like UN, for example, they only give aid when it's beneficial to themselves. Like if they are like, oh, I'm going to give you aid because then you have to sell all your uranium to me, that's when they're going to give aid. And that's why I think the model of aid, it's suicide. A lot of these countries who take like loans or aid, they often are stuck with very terrible situations afterwards. And the thing I think that happens a lot in these monarchies where you have a president is that a lot of these presidents, they only think about their own 5 years and they only think about how they can get as much money as possible in 5 years. And I think those are the corrupt leaders. So what a president who is a bit corrupt would do is they would get into power, take as many loans as possible. They would take as much aid as possible, and then they would distribute that among their own family members or their friends. They give them contracts. They do all these things that don't really exist. They make up companies that don't exist, and they just send in invoices to claim all of that money. And after 5 years, when they've completed their term, they're like, whatever, I don't care. Whatever you do, whatever debt you have, good luck. And they don't get chosen again. Or if they do get chosen again, or they commit a coup d'etat, or they try to change the constitution to stay in power, then they are able to have another term. But generally speaking, a lot of them, they just try to grab as much as they can. And we have that in Suriname as well. Every time there's an election, people will say, we're not going to take more loans. We're not going to get more of these like aid constructions that actually put us at a disadvantage economically. But then when the president actually arrives in power, they do all of the things they said they wouldn't do, including the current president. And like elections are going to be now. So I am very worried about that because I feel like they really shouldn't be such liars. And when they have been liars, I hope that the people will hold them accountable, but they usually don't. That is the case with Suriname. Then I wanted to tell you one really cool thing about Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is part of the Mali Empire, right? Used to be part of the Mali Empire. And one thing, I don't think a lot of people know this, but the Burkina Faso and the Mali Empire, they actually are the ones who established human rights in the world. So the African continent, as well as Muslims with their Muslim laws, they established human rights in the world. And so for Mali Empire, what's very noteworthy is Mande Charter. You have to know this name. Mande Charter is one of the oldest constitutions in the world. And it was in oral form, but what they advocated for had been unprecedented, except for in Islam, of course. And I just want to share that with you because this is a long time ago. I think everybody needs to know this. So this was at the time of Sunjata Keita, who is the founder of the Mali Empire. And in his constitution, he said that there should be social peace in diversity. So all types of people should be accepted, which in Islam we also know. Mande Charter also says there should be sacredness of the human being. It says that education is a right of the human being. And so this is like Islam as well. There should be integrity of the motherland and of course of the leaders. And then there should be food security. I mean, UN could never. They tried to pass the food security bill for the entire world and Israel and US were against it. So they could never. But Mande Charter could. And then they also promoted the abolition of capturing slaves. And it's really interesting. I saw images not too long ago in the US. They have have slavery in the prison system, right? And who is being locked up more than anyone else? Black people. And how is it possible that they're being locked up the most? Well, because they're being monitored the most as well, and also innocently being locked up. So yeah, the chances of them being the ones who to end up in these labor prison slash concentration camps are really high. Well, Mande Charter said that's not allowed. And then you have freedom of expression, which is also really interesting at that time that they talked about it, because we're talking about the 13th century over here. The West likes to pretend like they have a lot of freedom of expression, but that's not actually true. Russia has more freedom of expression on social media than the UK, for example. So these type of facts are important to know. They had freedom of trade. I mean, look at the US right now, like the entire trade system is crumbling. And then finally, Mande Charter from the Mali Empire in the 13th century were the first constitution that advocated for environmental protection. UN could never. UN started a few decades ago. They are not at that level at all. I'm very proud of them. I'm incredibly proud of them. And it's not a surprise that the West now pretends to be the leader when it comes to human rights and environmental rights and all of these different rights, but they're failing to implement them. But I do think that leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, who are saying we're not going to pretend like they are the leaders in these type of things, I think they're right. And I think that more countries should identify their own values that they've had for many centuries, which are very well established, and then try to live to them. Because if we're going to live according to what UN has been able to implement, I mean, then you can do whatever you want, right? Because like lately, all the countries have been able to do whatever they wanted. And those aren't strong values. Ibrahim Traoré is doing a great job, but it's not just Ibrahim Traoré, because he's also allied up, and he's allied up in AES, and I think everybody needs to know about that, which is like this union of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And I think that it's really important for people to be aware of that, because AES is also facing a lot of threats. Obviously, all these leaders who are trying to break free from France and other colonizers are facing a lot of threats. And if you don't know about it, you don't talk about it, these things can happen without any repercussions. These colonial powers can continue to lecture the rest of the world on how great they are and how everybody needs to listen to them, while they're not facing consequences for all of the criminal things they're doing. What's interesting is Howard University has done a lot of research on how Africa currently is being colonized by France, and they find things that I think are incredible. What they say is that the French, through these economic communities like ECOWAS, are pretending to care about Africans, but they're really not. And so things that they try to push upon the African countries, which are not beneficial at all for them, are, for example, the valuta which they use, which is the franc, the French franc. And they extract African resources from all of these countries. And a lot of these countries don't have a choice, really. They also make sure that their currency is pegged to the euro and that it's managed by France. And this is a way for France to control these countries. On top of that, 70% of the franc monetary zone, the CFA franc monetary zone of African foreign currency reserves, are required to be deposited and held at the French treasury. So why are they controlling what African countries do with their money? That's the question. This doesn't make sense, and this doesn't sound like independency at all. And I want everyone to look at the Alliance of the Sahel States, which is AES, because they're trying to break free from that, even though it means that they're now having to face like all these consequences by ECOWAS. Like even if they want to break free from ECOWAS, there's going to be a lot of sanctions posed upon them. Another thing that I thought was crazy, by the way, and it shows that France is a thief, like all these European countries are just stealing in Africa, is that Howard University, they talked about how uranium prices in Africa are kept incredibly low, around 80 cents per kg, when global uranium prices are around 56 euro. This is why European countries would want a corrupt leader to be in place. Because if they want to steal from these countries with these criminal prices for things like uranium, they would have to have a leader who sees a benefit, who personally is going to benefit from exploiting his own country. And so that's why all of these leaders are obviously pushing certain leaders forward so they can continue to steal from the country. I think Macron is a terrible person. Like, I've seen interview after interview after interview by him. In 2017 in Burkina Faso, he had a very disrespectful speech that he gave, and he basically insulted the president of Burkina Faso. He mocked him. The president actually walked away. He was like, oh, do I have to pay for your electricity? The university doesn't even have electricity. And like the audience was like laughing. Okay, it could be that these leaders are not doing a great job, but like from one government official to another to humiliate each other like that, I think it's not the way. And also this year, Macron gave a speech in January, and he talked about how African countries were ungrateful and they wouldn't be where they are without the French after everything they've taken from them, after how they exploited them. Like, he had the audacity to say that. And I think they're not doing themselves a favor by acting so incredibly distasteful. I'm very disappointed in them, but then again, it's Macron. So yeah, it's no surprise that in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, they found that 98% of the people, they actually wanted the French military to leave, and they are ready to face also these sanctions by ECOWAS. Can you believe it? So they're going to face sanctions by ECOWAS, which is supposed to protect the Africans if they don't want to work with them anymore. I think this is the story of Africa, and I think this is the story of United States and European control in the continent. There's no respect. There's no kindness also in their hearts towards these people, to talk to them in such disrespectful ways. I've never seen leaders, for example, in the parts of the world where I live, here in UAE or KSA or Qatar, I've never seen them speak so ungracefully. There is a way of conducting yourself, and I don't think this is the way. And I think that the French could learn a lot by visiting countries like these, where people still have this like gracefulness, and there's boundaries, and there's just limits of what is accepted and what is not accepted. Oh, I hope they come by and they can just like experience it themselves, because it feels like they've never seen what a normal human being like behaves like. Sorry to say it though. That's it for today. I'll have a new topic next week. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow me, and I look forward to seeing you again next week, inshallah. Thank you so much.